Hello, book people. P.T. Hilton here. Today, I want to discuss The Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman. I'm going to be discussing all three books: The Magicians, The Magician King, and The Magician's Land. So, lots of spoilers for all of those. So, if you've not read them yet, I encourage you to do so. It's one of my favorite series I've read in a long time. And even if you don't love the first book, which I personally did, but I know a lot of people, it's a divisive book. A lot of people don't love it. Even if you don't love that first book, I'd recommend carrying on with the series. With that, I'm going to get into the spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't read these already, I'll talk to you later. Turn this off. All right, if you're still here, that means you've read the three books, and welcome to Break Bill's Tennessee. I want to talk about trilogies, and I want to talk about the reason I like trilogies and what I think is cool in trilogies, and I want to use the Magician's trilogy as an example of a good version of that. I just finished writing the last book in my own trilogy, so I've been thinking a lot about trilogies and what I like in them and what works in them for me. In my mind, there's kind of two kinds of trilogies. One is just like one big story that's just kind of almost arbitrarily split into three books. And an example of that would be Lord of the Rings. I think that each book in that does not really have a beginning, middle, and end to the story. The story, I mean, I guess you could say that it does, but to me, it's mostly just one big story split into three books for publication. The second type of trilogy, the one that I prefer, the one I'm going to be talking about, and I'd argue that the Magician's trilogy is a trilogy that each individual book can stand alone as its own story, but when you put all three of them together, it makes something that's greater than the sum of its parts. And what I kind of want to talk about trilogies today is that I think that a good trilogy tells one big overarching story, and then it kind of tells that same story in three smaller chunks three times. So they say there's no second chances in life, but with the trilogy, I'd argue there's really three chances or four chances, because really you get the same story three times or variations on the same story three times, and then one more time the big story. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of what I mean by that in The Magicians and what I think made The Magicians work so well as a trilogy. So a couple examples of that. One would be Quentin's relationship with women. In all three of the books, we have a main kind of woman that Quentin is interacting with throughout the book. In the first one, Alice. In the second one, Julia. And in the third one, Plum. Now, in the first book, his relationship with Alice, Alice is another magician who is at least equally skilled with Quentin. You could probably even say more skilled than Quentin. But his relationship with her and with the other women in the books, even the little bit of interaction he has with Julia, it's very much about power dynamics. Like, if you look at the example of Julia early in the book, she's got all the power at first in his mind. In his mind, she's not giving him the time of day. She's kind of got the power over him. And then later in the book, when he's got the power over her, when she's asking about break bills and stuff like that, it's all about power. Same thing with Alice. Even though they have a relationship together, it's often like about power. Like he's at times kind of using her for like help in school, and then at other times she's kind of like a hindrance on his social life, it seems like, from his perspective. It's kind of all about power. In the second book, Alice has become a, whatever those things are, nymph or whatever. In that book, it's all about kind of trying to be the hero for Quentin. He wants to try to save Julia, so to speak. So he works with Julia. His relationship with Julia is better in a lot of ways, in that they work more as a team, and his relationship with her is not exactly equal footing. There's still some power dynamics that go on. And then in the final book, his relationship with Plum, who's kind of the primary female character in that book until, at least as far as Quentin's concerned, although, of course, Janet plays a big role, and Alice and Julia even later. It's kind of ironic that technically Plum is supposed to be he's supposed to be kind of Plum's mentor in a way throughout the book, but really they have the most like equal relationship. Like he works with her more like a partner than he has in the other books. So we can see throughout the three books that his progression, his relationship with women is kind of growing. He's becoming more mature in the way that he interacts with them, the way he treats them, all that stuff. And then the big overarching story would really be his relationship, I would say, with Alice, in that we see what I talked about in the first book, and then at the end we see what his relationship with her is like at the end of the book. Another example of these kind of three little stories in one big story is kind of his relationship with magic and also his relationship with himself. So in the first book, we see him, and at the beginning, he's kind of ashamed of like this love of magic and love of fillery. And, he talks about the cozy horse, which is like the big velveteen rocking horse thing, and how it's so silly, but like secretly he loves it actually. And there's that whole thing. And then as he gets the power, it's all about for him how is this power going to help him? How's he gonna use this power? And he has a lot of struggles, like how much should he be embracing the power? What should he be using it for? And obviously, we see him and his friends bumming around Brooklyn, not knowing what to do with the power at all. In the second book, it's all about Quentin kind of trying to be a hero. So he's trying to use the power and find new ways to like kind of fulfill his destiny, so to speak, with this power and use the power again to be a hero. So a little less selfish than the first book, but again, he's kind of trying to force this thing that is not necessarily meant to be. He's not accepting who he is. He's trying to use his power in a way that he thinks is what's supposed to be, and he's going with that. Then finally, in the third book, first of all, we see him finally figure out what his talent is with the repair of small objects. He actually, in the third book, he's mature enough that he kind of embraces that, and he kind of finds he actually likes doing repair of small objects and all that stuff like that. And then at the end of the book, when he's kind of finally saves Fillory for the final time, he's not even using his own power. So through the whole series, he's been struggling with how do I use this power? How can it help me? What can I do with it? That kind of stuff. And at the end, it's not even his own power that saves the day. It's the power that he takes from the god, but also it's that love of Fillory that he taught that at the very beginning was the thing he was ashamed of. That's what makes him the right person to use the power. So even though he thought all along that he should be using this power and it was all about the power, at the end of the day, it was the thing inside himself that he was ashamed of that ended up kind of saving everything. And kind of in the whole macro story, we could see that again. In the end of each book, he goes to a different land. At the end of book 1, he goes to Fillory. At the end of book 2, he comes back to Earth. And finally, at the end of book 3, he goes to the land that he's created. So we can kind of see he's looking for different things in these different places and ways to use his magic. But at the end, it's not what he thought it would be. It's something new that he's created that gives him his place in the world. I thought it was really cool how at the end, when they go to that final land, they see the cozy horse, the big velveteen rocking horse, and instead of being ashamed of it, he embraces it and rides it. And that was a great way, I think, for Lev Grossman to show how much he's kind of accepted himself as a person throughout the series. So those are just a few examples. I think if we look deeper, we'd find a lot more examples of kind of the things that happen sort of 3 times throughout the series. I touched on, going to different worlds, but again, that's something else that happens 3 times throughout the series, but each time, well, it happens more than 3 times, but the book ends each time with going to a different world, and each time it's a little bit different. There's a lot of those different things throughout the series that I think we could look at. I think Lev Grossman did really a marvelous job of hitting that trilogy thing of the 3 small stories that form together to make the better overall story. I don't know how much of this he had planned out at the beginning, but great job to Lev Grossman. That's exactly what I love in trilogies. And I hope you liked the Magician's Trilogy as much as I did, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts below, whether you liked it or didn't like it, if you've read the whole thing. If you've not read the whole thing, you did not stop watching when I recommended you stop watching. That's going to do it for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Magician's Trilogy. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.